Eine neue Ära steht an und es wird Zeit, darüber zu sprechen, hier beim kleinen Entwickler-Interview mit Civilization VII. Hallo liebe Leute da draußen, herzlich willkommen hier bei Rocket Beans TV. Wir sitzen in unserem fantastischen kleinen Glaskasten hier und wir werden gleich ein bisschen über Civilization VII sprechen. Ein Spiel, wo ich schon sagen werde, das ist auf jeden Fall das Spiel, was die Messe für mich als Highlight verlassen wird. Vorher aber nochmal vielen Dank an unsere Kollegen von den fantastischen Leuten von Samsung, die uns natürlich hier unterstützen und das Ganze erst möglich machen. Und ihr könnt natürlich mit dem Code GAMESCOM24 euch bis zu 10% Rabatt auf ausgewählte Gaming-Produkte sichern. Der Link dazu findet ihr unten in der Beschreibung. Hier unten ist er. In der Bauchbinde. Guckt da gerne mal rein, es gibt jede Menge Rabatte und sichert euch ein paar fantastische neue Produkte von Samsung. Gut, aber I would say, without further ado, I will introduce to you Ed Beach, Creative Director of Civilization. Hi, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Ed, it's a very exciting time for fans of Civilization, I have to say, because you just revealed the first gameplay, the first real big trailer of Civilization VII. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. It was an exciting night last night with Opening Night Live. Lots of people got their first look at Civilization VII. And you were happy to answer questions more, so I'm looking forward to diving deep with you here.
Great. Wir haben natürlich auch den Chat offen, das heißt, ihr könnt auch gerne in den Chat reinschreiben, wenn ihr irgendwelche Fragen habt. Ich habe natürlich auch ein bisschen was vorbereitet und ein bisschen ins Forum geguckt. So Ed, can you please tell the people out there what is the role of a creative director? What are you doing for the Civilization games?
I need to set the big creative vision for the game. I used to do all the little details and work on the AI and make sure every little bonus was at the right number. We've got a much bigger team now. There are lots of people who are very good at that kind of stuff now. So it's more setting the big vision, playing the game a lot just to make sure everything is coming along nicely. And just our design team is large enough. We have specialists just in our narrative systems and our combat systems and our economic systems. So just working out how all those teams are working together and making sure everything's coming together the way we want it to.
Okay, great. I have to say Civilization VI was a very big step in the series for me. It was very modern, very new, and now we have Civilization VII upcoming. What are parts of Civilization VI that you were very fond of and that you would say are very important for Civilization VII as well?
So we have a plan at FIRAXIS to, whenever we go to a new version of Civilization, we have to keep enough of the core FIRAXIS and Civilization sort of DNA gameplay in place. So we try to do 1/3 that doesn't change, 1/3 that we upgrade, and 1/3 that's brand new.
Oh,
so we sat down with our design team and we looked at every system in the game from Civ VI and which ones we wanted to change. And they are very good at being self-critical.
Okay.
And so they wanted to change almost everything.
I see.
And so that was probably one of my big parts of my job, was saying, you need to think about what we really need to change and what's working actually pretty well. So I would say what was working pretty well was the military combat. Once you had all the forces from both sides in play, engaged with each other, that all the little tactical interplay, I'm firing my archer, but my swordsman in front of him is protecting him, all that we felt like really worked well. So we didn't want to change that, but we'll talk about, there are some key changes to the military side of the game, and the biggest problem we saw there was getting my army to your city to attack you. Was ever since Civ V and we put all the units out 1 unit per tile, that was very difficult. And we wanted to fix that. Once I got there and my army was deployed in front of you and we were going to brawl it out, that's fine. But we wanted to fix the how do I get there problem.
I see. I think in my games, it always was like the step when you get to the railroad, that you can get your units into the game or into the fights, and then the next step with airports, of course.
Right.
Then you can airdrop the people, and that was the parts where really the combat in my games upgraded to the next level, I have to say. So, wir können gerne mal in den Trailer reinschalten, liebe Regie. We're just looking on the trailer you just released at the opening night live, I would say, and then after that we will see a little bit about of the official gameplay showcase you released just after the opening night live at your FIRAXIS and Civilization YouTube channels. Can you tell us what is the defining feature of Civilization VII that is different from Civilization VI?
So the big thing that we're trying to do, and we feel like we've succeeded with, is break the game up into pieces, into chapters. So we have 3 chapters in the game. We call them ages. They're bigger. We've always had eras in a Civ game, but these are bigger.
Okay.
I mean, if you're thinking about a whole 1/3 of a Civilization game, that's a lot of time period. That's thousands of years usually. So breaking the game up into pieces like that, it helps us avoid the problem you have in a 4X game where everything just expands out exponentially, and you have too many cities to manage, you have too many units to manage. When we can bring things back down and make them calmer and start up a new age, we can reset a few of the things.
Okay.
And that manages that exponential growth, because we had a lot of data that players love to start Civilization games, but maybe not so much do they like to finish Civilization games.
I mean, is there really a finish to a Civilization game?
We think there's going to be more of one now.
Okay, great. That's very great, because you have to play so many hours to get to a satisfying finish in a Civilization game. I think it's really interesting to break the games up into smaller bits and to have these bits interchange and go with each other. Can you tell us more about the 3 ages? What are the 3 ages and what are their core gameplay?
So the Antiquity Age, you can think of that as the age of the first great empires. So up through the Roman Empire for sure, but there are major empires in India and China at the same time. What we found, we have a big writing and history department now, and working with those historians who really know exactly. I mean, I've got a pretty good sense of it, but I like to double check these things.
Of course, yeah.
Across the world, around 400 AD, all those empires fell apart, like the Roman Empire did. There was outside invaders, they had plagues, they had civil wars internally, and none of them survived until they started building back up in the Middle Ages.
Okay.
So that's the way history worked, and Civilization was always too much of a straight ascent with no hiccups and road bumps and speed bumps and so forth. And now we have that. When you get to the end of an age, you have what we call crises.
Okay.
And the crisis system, it's not always the same crisis every time. We're testing a bunch of different ideas there, and we have one that we're demonstrating this week, which is an invasion crisis, where it's sort of like barbarian invaders come in. So, unfortunately, I'm not sure we're giving people a long enough demo to get all the way there, but that works very well. And you get that sense that my empire, it has hit its peak, and it's getting challenged, and it needs to transition to something else. And so we have 2 historical breaks like that in the game, and when you come back from that, so at the end of the Antiquity Age, which is around that 400 AD mark, you move into an exploration age, and then basically you jump forward a few hundred years in history, and now you're at the point where you're ready to sail across the seas and figure out what's on the other side of the world.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
And that's actually something that's important, is we love those moments in a Civilization game where you're exploring the map.
Yeah.
I feel like those are always super fun, a highlight of a game. But people could do things like they could pick an archipelago map, and they could explore everything right away, because their boats could get everywhere. And we wanted to actually slow that down a little bit and let people experience that fun of exploration. That's the best way to start out a new chapter. And so that's what the chapter starts with for the exploration age. And that goes all the way up until you get to the late Renaissance, and we start having rebellions, things like the American colonies revolting, and
French Revolution
and so forth. So there are a lot of challenges to what monarchies mean then. And so that's the same thing where we see all across the world the same kind of things where the empires have to reorganize themselves into a more modern state. And so that's the 3rd period, is the modern period. And that's a very active period. You've got world wars being fought, you've got airplanes being developed, you've got space technology being developed. So that's the crazy end of the game. But what this breaking it up into chapters means, you should experience each of those parts, because with a little bit of a reset, players don't fall so far behind, or the AI doesn't get too far ahead. And if you just love one age, you can play just that one age, or you can. I think most of our players are going to want to play through all of this.
Yeah, of course, totally. How long is one age going to be approximately an hour?
It's about a third of what the game used to be. So we think the game's full length is the same.
Yeah.
But we still have, like, when you play in multiplayer, you can speed things up, and the default speed is faster, which makes multiplayer sessions, which used to be 6 hours or so to get through. They're we play multiplayer all the time in the office, and they're like 2 to 3 hours now. It's very
interesting,
very manageable.
Okay, so let us just start our official gameplay showcase, or the official gameplay showcase. Then we can talk a little bit about scenes from the showcase, and we see much more about the game. You just talked about the ages. So we're seeing here the start of the game, the Antiquity Age, as it's called, right? And you already talked about that the pieces of the game are much smaller, especially in the beginning. So am I right that at the beginning in the Antiquity Age, the map will not be fully explorable until you get into the Explorer's Age?
Basically, about half, a little bit more than half the map is explorable. It's your home landmass.
Yeah.
But we ensure that there's deep ocean between you and the other half of the map, and you can't get the technology to get across deep ocean until the next age. So it's a pretty easy rule for us to enforce. But it's good. There's still plenty of opponents and plenty of things to fight over, and it'll keep you busy well until you're ready for the other side of the map.
Okay, I see. So we are seeing a small settlement here, or city, and if I'm correct, there's a distinction now between a fully developed city and a smaller settlement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right, so the smaller settlements are called towns.
Okay.
And the first thing you do is you're just trying to claim that land and probably the resources that are there. So you settle that town. It has to be within a certain distance of one of your cities so that a road is automatically built back and the resources can be hooked up to your city. And initially that town doesn't have a build queue that you have to manage. You don't have to pick production for it every turn. It just turns its production into gold. Okay. And if you need something there, you can buy it with gold. But the purpose of the town is to collect the resource, start providing gold. Eventually you can pick a specialization for that town, so you can make it so it's a food basket and it sends food to nearby cities. It could be a frontier town that's like provides fortification bonuses to units around it. So they have lots of different roles. You can always convert it to a city. So it could be always your plan that, this is going to be my number 2 city in my empire. But that costs more gold, and it's expensive to do right after the town is founded. It's better to wait a little bit until it grows. Okay. The bigger it is, the cheaper it is to turn it into a city.
Yeah. I find it interesting because a way to play in Civilization VI was to get as much settlers out as possible and just to claim all the map with small cities. And I find that the settlement thing is interesting because it plays against this a little bit, so that you cannot found a city right away, just have to live for a few rounds with the settlement.
So there also are some different roles for the different yields in the game. Okay. So in the past, culture determined when your city would expand its boundaries. Now food does that. Okay. So you're like, well, what's culture good for? So we still have civic trees, so culture is still good for that. But culture also, in the civics tree, there's something called the settlement limit. Okay. And if you've gone all the way back to Civ IV, you might remember that you had to keep a certain number of cities near your capital. There's nothing to do with how near the capital they are. Yeah. But if you try to expand too much and put all those cities down real quickly, you will start, and you haven't invested in culture, you'll get ahead of that settlement limit, and all of your cities will be less effective, kind of like they were in Civ IV.
Okay, interesting. Let's just talk a little bit about the gameplay we saw. Some people in the chat already saw that river tiles, it's a very specific question.
Oh, no, that's good.
That river tiles are now specific tiles and that you can have units and ships on it. Is this correct?
That's absolutely correct. There are navigable rivers.
Great.
They lead out to the sea. Yeah. We actually have a whole new way that we generate our continents. Okay. I worked with the graphics team to come up with a map generation system where there's a rainfall model.
Yeah.
And we put rain across the terrain and then figure out, based on their elevation model, where the rivers would form.
Great, interesting.
And then where there's a lot of rain, the rivers get wide enough to become navigable.
Yeah.
And they can feed into lakes, and then the lakes exit and they go out to sea. So people were used to canals in Civ VI Gathering Storm. We'll have canals in here eventually.
Okay.
But right now, just playing with the navigable rivers is so fun.
Yeah.
You don't even need the canals right now.
Okay, great. That's very interesting. Let's just continue with our questions. Let us talk a little bit about the leaders. So the leaders are new, have a much more prominent role in Civilization VII. Is this correct?
Yeah. So the number one thing is your leader is your identity.
Yeah.
And we found that when we look at the Civ communities or we talk to Civ players, they always identify themselves and their opponent by the leader. They always get angry, like, I hate playing against Alexander the Great because he's so annoying. Yeah. And it's not that I didn't like playing against Macedon or I didn't like playing against Greece. It's always that face, Alexander the Great. Yeah. He's the one. So the leaders are the players in the game. Okay. And that's gonna, no matter what happens with ages and transitions and everything, they stay the same. If Alexander the Great's on your east border, he's going to be there all day game. Okay. He's not going away. Yeah. And we find that's very natural to our players. But if our leaders are going to progress through all these ages, we want them to be able to get better and better. So there's a whole system where you can earn leader attributes. Okay. And it's skill trees, basically, to level your leader up in 6 different areas of the game, like diplomacy, economics, whatever. So they get the leaders are better in the areas that they historically were good at. Okay. So we have like a very exciting new leader is Benjamin Franklin. He never ruled America, but he was a great diplomat and a great scientist at the same time. And so he can get attribute points for any of the skill trees, but he'll get those diplomacy and science points faster than anything else.
Okay, I see. And of course, when you switch into the next era, your civilization will change. This is correct, right?
Right. So we did a lot of research into, I was trying to figure out how I was going to take the Civ VI district system and do something new for it in the next game. And I looked at a lot of cities through history. I looked at London as probably the biggest case study of that. And I looked at how it started, just like Cologne did, as a Roman town. And then an empire came through in the Middle Ages. For Cologne, it would have probably been the Holy Roman Empire, the Frankish Empire. For London, it's the Norman Empire. And then finally, it became a more modern state, so Britain or Prussia or Germany. So there are these natural periods of history, but that we were talking about before. But the empires usually are very different in terms of what their bonuses would be and how they should play and what's historically correct for them. And this idea of layering up who you're playing and coming up with a path, like, I start as Rome, but where do I want to go? Do I want to go towards Prussia, Germany? Do I want to go towards England or France? That's really interesting to me, both as a history person who loves history, but also as a game player. So that's how we built the game. Our towns are built in the same kind of layers that cities like Cologne and London were built in, which is why they can look pretty dense early in the game, and you're like, there's no room for anything else. We have this system where you build on top of it so we call it overbuilding. Okay. And the buildings from the previous age are there in the next stage, but they're not as powerful. They lose their adjacency bonuses. So you want to get those new buildings down on top of them because those are very, very powerful.
Interesting.
And buildings like science buildings always want to be in the same place. So you have to think about adjacencies, but you typically end up like, I'll start with libraries, but I'll probably build my universities on top of it in the next stage.
Okay, interesting. I think we have time for one more question, and I saw it in the chat already. When you advance into the next age, does everybody advance at the same time, every game, every player, and only the first player triggers the new age?
So there's a meter that's filling up.
Okay.
And right now it's set to at standard speed 200 points.
Yeah.
And each turn a point is added in there. Okay. So the most an age can last is 200 turns. But in each of our ages, there are things milestones you can hit in science, in culture, in economics, and in military to give you special rewards that will help you later in the game.
Okay.
And if I hit one of those milestones, the first player to hit one of those milestones dumps a bunch of points into that bucket.
Ah, okay, I see, yeah.
So you can see it coming.
Yes.
And if you're the leader, you can kind of control when it's going to happen.
Okay.
But that age transition is going to happen eventually, and everyone happens at the same time. It's that break in history that I was talking about where all the empires fell apart for a couple hundred years. So you're playing through that, and then everybody regroups and goes into the next stage.
I see. It's a way of balancing the game also. So there's not one player who's always in the lead. He is always...
There's a new tech tree in that age, so everyone gets to jump into the new tech tree.
Yeah.
That player who was really good at science in the previous age will have some of those milestone bonuses.
Okay.
They'll start with advantages.
Yeah.
But the other people will get to catch up quite a bit, probably.
So no more fighting tanks against archers,
that is one thing we've lost.
Ah, okay, I see. So, thank you very much, Ed. It was a very pleasure having you here. And just to inform the people, the game is coming out in February next year.
February
correct?
11th.
February 11th. So we can look forward to that. And I can say that I will play the game tomorrow at your stage.
That's awesome.
And my colleague Niels, unser großer Civ-Fan, he will present some gameplay later today in our recap show, and we'll talk much more about Civilization VII in the next month, I think. Thank you very much, Ed, that you're here. And yeah. Für euch da draußen, liebe Leute, meine Güte, Englisch, Deutsch. Für euch da draußen, liebe Leute, es war eine große Freude. Vielen, vielen Dank, dass ihr mit dabei wart. Ihr könnt noch weitere Fragen stellen. Ich werde versuchen, die euch noch im Forum zu beantworten. Und ansonsten guckt gerne die Recap-Show rein, da erzählen wir noch ein bisschen mehr über Civilization 7. Und ansonsten bleibt dran, hier geht es direkt weiter mit dem Gamescom-Programm. Und ich weiß nicht, was jetzt kommt, aber später gibt es die Recap-Show. Bleibt also gerne dran. Tschüss!